The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
TV party tonight! What? TV party tonight!
Oh, we got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews.
Don't want to talk about anything else.
We don't want to know.
We're dedicated, yes.
To our favorite shows.
Oh, my circuit!
Everybody loves Hypnotoad.
Scary dog!
Blinson at Blurnsville.
Futurama!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to TV Party Tonight. I am your host, Alexis Hejna, and today, whenever you're listening, we are going to be delving into a very controversial show that came to us through Netflix, Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer Story. This was brought to us by Ryan Murphy, who, if that name sounds familiar, this is the guy who also gave us American Horror Story, American Crime Story, among several other series. Brought to you by the folks at Netflix, Prospect Films, and Ryan Murphy Productions. Joining me is Mark Radulich, showcasing... Okay, you have to tell the story with your shirt. Just please.
Okay, so working backwards, I am wearing a shirt that says "Say Perhaps to Drugs" because I'm funny. So a little ways back, I got tickets to go see Gwar with some friends of mine here in Orlando, Florida. That show was this past Wednesday. If you don't know anything about Gwar, they are a interdimensional psychotic death metal band from beyond the nether regions. But more importantly than all that, they come to their shows dressed in, their armor and regalia, and they spray bodily fluids into the crowd. There's usually a bunch of inflatable genitalia lining the lining the stage. There's all kinds of hypersexualized paraphernalia. Like I said, and they spray blood. They spray. They spray, they cray. All of it. This blue liquid all over the place. And so if you're going to a Gwar show, and you're going to be on the floor anywhere near the stage, and you really want that experience, you're going to get hit with this liquid. And the best way to showcase getting hit with the liquid is wear a white t-shirt. I don't own a lot of white, being a bigger guy for most of my life, tend to wear a lot of darker colors. But I had to go out and buy white clothing for this show. And I didn't want to just buy a white t-shirt and look like, a reject from an Eminem video. So I was like, I'm looking at white t-shirts I can buy, and I see the one that say Perhaps to Drugs. I was like, well, this fits because they say that one of the things that inspires their act is crack. So I was like, perfect. And I was in the pit as even at almost 50 years old, I'll still get in the mosh pit and bounce around. I was right there, not as close as I wanted to be. It was a pretty packed show at the Beecham, but close enough that I got errant spray every once in a while. And I was doing a lot of recording for the girl who I was supposed to take, ended up having to stay home for a variety of reasons. So she was like, please just send me a bunch of video. So I did. So there'd be times I'm recording with my phone and I'm not, and I can see the spray and I don't feel like I'm in the spray zone. And then suddenly I'm right in the face, right in the pirate eye. It's just, so a lot of my footage is, one of those deals. A lot of fun. Anyway, so this is what happened to my shirt. All this red spray. I got some blue spray on me too when he was spraying from his cod piece that he was wearing.
The cod piece. I'm sorry, just so not nonchalantly you said that.
Oh yeah, I absolutely got came on by Gwar, and I loved every minute of it. Ta-da!
Oh, thank you so much for that, Mark. I needed
You're welcome.
that.
Yeah, Alexis said you have to wear that shirt on the Dahmer review, and I was like, done. However, I will not be wearing this to Stevie Nicks tonight. I'm going to change my shirt.
Well, obviously, you want to make sure that shirt doesn't get covered with glitter.
Yeah, I got to get a new shirt so I can get it all bedazzled.
Exactly. Yeah. What was the sign language for it? Glitter? That's what we learned when we reviewed Only Murders in the Building, something like that. Yeah, because they were like, "Oh, that's fancy."
Yes.
All right. So, yes, we are talking about the miniseries that premiered on Netflix about Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Dahmer had killed. Let's see. I'm trying to actually get I should have pulled the data. So I got all the stuff on the show here, but I actually don't have anything on Dahmer himself. And it's like, I really probably should have that as well. All right. American serial killer and sex offender who committed the murder and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991, with many of his later murders involving necrophilia, cannibalism, and the permanent preservation of body parts, typically all or part of the skeleton. So, yeah, this is kind of a gruesome chapter in American history. Dahmer is portrayed by Evan Peters, who is, again, if you're a fan of Ryan Murphy's work, you should be very familiar with him. Peters has been in, I believe, all seasons of American Horror Story. I could be wrong, but I think all seasons. If you're not a fan of that, he also portrayed Quicksilver in the new X-Men movies. That was where I was actually introduced to him. It's a lot of fun in that role. This is just such a departure from that role, though. He is absolutely terrifying in this. He is just really, really scary. This is a very dark series. A lot of people I talked to who watched it actually said they couldn't binge the whole thing, that they had to take breaks. I did have to take breaks. My husband and I watched like 2 to 3 episodes at a time. It's like, okay, we're going to go do something else. Mark, how did you handle this show? What was it for you?
I think just because of my professional background and the things that I've been exposed to in my life, I got that it's creepy. It definitely moves at a slow pace, especially the first 2-3 episodes. But I didn't feel like it was overwhelming the way that you had been describing. I mean, Evan Peters' performance is a tour de force. He is absolutely phenomenal in this.
Give this man an Emmy right now, please.
Yeah, if he doesn't at least get an Emmy nomination, if not outright win the thing, that's a crime against his career. The whole cast, Niecy Nash is phenomenal in this. I want to answer your question, but just a quick side thing on Niecy Nash. She doesn't get a lot of credit for being an outstanding actress. She's kind of tarred with that Reno 911 feather, where it's like, that's all anyone, she's been in Claws. She's had a whole bunch of different roles and different things. And she kind of gets the loud black woman thing a lot of times, and she gets kind of dismissed. But go back and look through her more dramatic offerings. She is a phenomenal actress, and she really brings it here. If you are looking for a actress to sort of portray the trauma and hurt of the collective African-American experience, boy, does Niecy Nash do that in this show. She's outstanding, and I can't say enough good things about her. And the rest of the cast is good too. But between her and Evan Peters, they are really carrying the weight of this show on their shoulders. As for my own personal experience with it, I broke it up over a couple of different viewings, not necessarily because it was too overwhelming, just because of time. I would watch a little bit at work on my breaks. I watched a bunch yesterday before I took my kids to go see Black Adam. And then I almost finished it this morning. It was actually on episode 10 when we started. So it was just over a matter of trying to fit it into my ever so busy schedule. I'm social. So just trying to
social and responsible for a collection of knuckleheads on this network.
Correct. So I had a lot going on, and which part of why I stepped out of doing television reviews is I just don't have time to watch 10 hours of television per week. So I really tried to fit as much of this in where I could, when I could. As far as the series' effect on me, I mean, working in the criminal justice system for the past decade, I have seen some shit both literally and figuratively. I have heard some horrendous stories. I've seen a lot of men bleeding for one reason or another, because I work in the mental health part of correctional medicine. So other than just being mesmerized by performances and the weight of the story being told, I didn't necessarily feel the need to walk away from the television. I could have done 10 hours of this without an issue if I had the time.
Guess you're just made of stronger stuff than I am.
We'll trade. I'll make jewelry for a year. You go work in a jail, and then we'll watch the same show and see how we do.
Yeah, good point.
Mm.
Yeah, Niecy Nash does play she does so good in this. She plays Glenda Cleveland, who is Dahmer's neighbor in the apartment complex. And a lot of this is actually a fascinating show because it's not just from Dahmer's point of view. This isn't just about him. We see a lot from her point of view as his neighbor. We see all the stuff she did not know what he was doing, obviously, but she had her reasons to suspect him. She was terrified. There was horrible smells coming from there. There were all these noises. There was we have the case of the one young man that he basically tries to lobotomize and zombify, and she tries to get him help, and the cops do nothing. And it's
my boyfriend. It certainly is.
Yeah, it's absolutely, she's terrified. She knows something is going on. She doesn't know what. She doesn't know the extent. And it really is scary for her. And we see a lot of her perspective both before Dahmer's arrested and after that. The fact that she is now, she's coming to grips with living next to a serial killer. We get a great scene where she and her daughter come home, and there's a couple of freaking Dahmer fanboys outside the apartment, and they're taking pictures and like making motions like, and she's just like, oh my God, I live next to this. I had to deal with this. Why are you glamorizing it? We see so much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Talk about that? Yeah, can we just talk about that? Because I'm just going to read from the wiki here because I think, and not that I want to take over your hosting duties here, but this kind of bothers me on a couple of different levels. The series was controversial. This is right from the Wikipedia page in the introduction. The series was controversial upon its release. While Peter's performance was praised by some critics, the series has largely received controversy and backlash for the glamorized, disrespectful, and exploitive nature of Dahmer and his murders. Dahmer's surviving victims and relatives of the deceased victims have criticized the series for similar reasons, with many calling the series traumatizing. The show has led to a number of people preemptively dressing. Okay, well, we don't need to get into that right this second.
We'll get into that a little bit later.
I want to talk about the word glamorizing because I feel like it's way overused. Let me posit a personal opinion about documentaries, biopics, etc., that deal in this kind of territory. It is important to report on things that happened in history, and many things that happened in history were very ugly. They're terrible. We as human beings have been shitty to each other, and we continue to be in different ways.
Yes.
Yeah. To not talk about and pass on the stories of years past of the bad things we did, we will forget them, and when you forget history, you tend to repeat it.
Yeah, it's like those who do not learn from history.
Right.
It's one of the most famous phrases in the world for a reason, because we don't learn from it. We do it over and over again.
When Sean first said, hey, we're moving from audio to video, and we'll still have audio, but we're mostly going to be a video show now, a video podcast network. The first thing he said was like, you don't want to just show two people talking. You want to put up like pictures and graphics, and you want to make it visually appealing. We've since gotten away from that because you will get dinged for everything on YouTube. So I tend to be very careful with what I put on screen, having, one or two community violations on our record.
Yeah, but that's why we stopped doing trailer reacts too. We got really tired of getting in trouble.
Right. So my point is, like, when Ryan Murphy takes it upon himself to tell the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, he has to do so in a way that's engaging for the audience, that's narratively appealing, aesthetically intriguing. You got to put something on screen that people are going to want to watch for 10 hours, broken up or all at once. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you keep it interesting without tripping up the people who say you're glamorizing, you're being exploitive. No, he was telling the story. I don't know how much of this is exactly what happened with the people involved and how much of it is creative license, but that's also a trick to creating entertainment, whether it's based on real life or not, is you get to have some degree of creative license. My cousin George once said, but I think it was the Queen movie he was complaining about. He was just like, I was like, it was a fun movie, but I don't know what band they're talking about. Half of that shit didn't happen. The VH1 movie about Def Leppard, where they were like, and they cleaned up their act and then released Hysteria. And my friends looking at me going, are you kidding me? They were so drunk on the Hysteria tour. It's legendary. Like, I understand that not every biopic is going to be 100% accurate to the story, and sometimes you have to make creative licensing decisions in order to get it out there. But I'm really getting a little. I don't want to be disrespectful to the victims, but I do think that people. I don't want to speak specifically about the victims of this, but just in general, people get a little hypersensitive about their story. And like, we don't want our story told. We want it told because we want to punish the police who a lot of this is about police incompetence. A lot of this is about neglect, benign neglect of the African American community, of the gay community. Gay black men are being eaten by a blonde white guy. Really, who's being harmed? That kind of a thing.
They do point out throughout the series that Dahmer lived in a predominantly poor area of the city, which was more heavily populated with minorities. Majority of his victims were minorities.
Right.
And the cops essentially say that's just Dahmer seems to come across, the way Dahmer's portrayed, he seems to come across more like that was just what was available to him.
That was what available was at the market at the time.
Pretty much. He openly, because one cop actually says, "Why did you live in this area?" He's like, "Were you purposely going after black people, living in this neighborhood, living in this particular building?" And he says something to the effect of, "It's what I could afford."
Right.
So
he's not being driven by race. The issue of race becomes part of the narrative because of the way the police treated it. Again, you're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. Again, but blacks and gays not high on the radar of protection for most police precincts. There's a reason why Public Enemy wrote a song called 911 as a joke. Because while the black neighborhood is burning down, the cops will get there eventually. That kind of a thing. So my point being, like, you have to, if you choose to tell this, once you've decided you're going to tell this horrific story, you have to do so in a way that's entertaining. And I guess that entertaining comes across as exploitive to people, or the fact that you did it at all. It's like I feel like we're just so afraid to talk about the bad things that everyone's knee-jerk reaction. And not to be too provocative here, but I feel like this is a conversation that my wife and I have had about like toxic masculinity. Everything is toxic. Everything is exploitive. Everything is sensational. Okay, when you overuse those words, then nothing is any of those things. And you can't have a conversation. If Alexis and I are having a conversation and every word out of my mouth, she goes, "You're being toxic. You're being, you're a toxic." I actually was wearing a shirt earlier that says toxic masculinity in rainbow letters. But if you can't have a civil conversation between people and share ideas without one person resorting to blanket Twitter-esque name calling, you're toxic, you're gaslighting, you're sensationalizing, you're being exploitive, then there is no conversation to be had and nothing gets talked about and nothing gets worked on. And we just end up eating our tail. That is my big frustration with this series, is that it speaks to something that absolutely needs to be talked about. The benign neglect of police to underserved minority communities. The experiences of gay men, the fact that we have a mental health crisis in this country that lends itself, in some very rare cases, but definitely in some cases, to a homicidal maniac who is drugging and kidnapping and eating people. And we have to start somewhere with that conversation. Shows like this get those conversations going. That's the purpose that they serve, other than entertaining and getting people to subscribe to Netflix. It's a little frustrating to hear people then, like, "Oh, I don't want my story being told." Okay.
It is interesting because it appears that a lot of those who complained about this either were upset that they weren't consulted for this, or they were just upset that this happened in general. I got some quotes here from some of those who made their voices clear. We have Eric Perry, a cousin of Dahmer victim Errol Lindsay. He tweeted that his relatives did not find out about the series until when it was released. And this series re-traumatized many of the victim's loved ones. Lindsay's sister Rita Isabel, who is depicted in the series yelling at Dahmer in a courtroom scene, that's actually a very famous clip that you can find on YouTube, described the show as feeling, quote, harsh and careless. Shirley Hughes, the mother of Tony Hughes, who was also killed by Dahmer, criticized the series for both inaccurately depicting the events surrounding her son's murder and for not contacting her or other surviving loved ones of the victims during the production process.
I can't remember, Alexis, at any point in the credits of this, or was there like a warning that that these scenes have been dramatized for purposes or anything like that?
If there was, I sure as heck don't remember it. The
Okay.
only note that I remember seeing was that there was apparently a call to build a memorial to the victims of Dahmer in the empty lot where they tore down the building. And that memorial has never come to surface. But again, is that the best thing to do something like that? Is that not just the same as a show like this? Does that not just, maybe not glamorize, but does it not just bring up those memories?
When does this stop? At what point do we never discuss history? Do we never discuss things that have happened? Do we not use anecdotes from this event or that event to give examples of things that we're talking about, that we're trying to teach people? You have to pass the knowledge on to the next generation or it gets lost. So when do I'm sensitive to the oversensitivity in our culture. And I would love to talk to people from Europe about this, because I feel like people from Europe have a completely different sense of these things. Oh, there's this serial, Jack the Ripper or something. Oh, there's a serial killer that running around England. They're oh, it's fine. People in France are just drinking wine. It's fine. Nobody cares. Only in America are people I don't want my story being told. I should have been consulted. Nobody can do anything without, running it through the fucking Star Wars level Coruscant Council of a billion fucking senators.
Well,
get anything
there is also in the fact that you're bringing up Jack the Ripper. I think it's also important to point out, what are you drinking?
The blood of my victims. No, it's
what is that?
It's Publix brand green tea with ginseng and honey.
I'm sorry, just every now and then you pull out this giant jug. I'm like, what is it?
I pour things in a nice glass, and then you can't see it. I pour things in a nice glass, and then I run out, and then I need something to drink, and I gotta run off camera. Now I'm prepared.
Okay.
Focus, woman.
Sorry, you're the one with the giant jug of mystery juice.
Oh my god.
So, what you were talking about with Jack the Ripper, though, I think it is important to point out that, again, Dahmer was killing up until 1991. This is still technically recent history. We can talk about Jack the Ripper all day long because anyone associated with that is long dead.
Right.
This is a much more recent case. Was this done too early? Should we have waited? Is it it has to be does it have to take more time before we're willing to talk about this?
What, at least 30 years? I mean, Tanya Harding, that whole story, that movie, I, Tanya, happens a decade or two after the she got taken out at the knees. Not that you can compare that to murder, but
obviously.
But I feel like we deal with stuff a lot sooner than 30 years. There's a precedent set. Yeah, I personally, and I'll entertain a debate about this, I guess, but I personally think as a culture we're a little too sensitive to this sort of thing. I think you put up a warning that says these events are dramatized for entertainment purposes. I think I think you can talk. I think you can consult with these people, or at least a courtesy letter out there. But I don't know how many people on Brian Murphy's production team even knew how to get out of contact all of these people, how to find them. It's been 30 years at the least. So anyway, what else did you want to talk about?
Well, there was another again, let's go ahead and talk about the other article that was mentioned in that Wiki Almost Read, in which apparently now we have the popularity of Jeffrey Dahmer Halloween costumes, which eBay has prohibited on their site. They are removing any and all listings of those. There has been a massive skyrocket in Dahmer's popularity due to this. My sister actually shared a Reddit feed on her Facebook page with people commenting about how adorable Dahmer was. These are real life pictures they're using on the Reddit feed.
Mhm.
These are not pictures of Evan Peters, who, yes, is gorgeous. No question there. And there's all these people just like, oh, he's so adorable. He's so cute. I just want to pinch his cheeks. And it's like, do you people not know what he did? And there is just, and I know that Dahmer was technically very good looking. He used his charm and good looks to lure many of his victims, obviously. Very similar to how Ted Bundy got his victims. This is not unheard of in cases of serial killers. But the fascination that has just come up with this, it's disturbing. It's kind of fascinating. What did you think of the article I sent you about the Jeffrey Dahmer Halloween costumes?
I mean, it's another example of how ridiculous we are in this culture. Hey, real quick. So there's all kinds of controversy about this series. We reviewed Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile right here on this very network, the very same. And that was about Ted Bundy, played by Zac Efron. It was me, Pat, and Robert Winfrey. That
Great
came
series.
out. Yeah, that came out May 3rd, 2019 on Netflix. And I'm looking through it here. I'm looking through the wiki. I don't see a tremendous amount of backlash to this.
There wasn't. The biggest news about that was, again, just how dark it was. There was a lot of articles about don't watch this alone, don't watch this in the dark kind of a thing. And I'm not gonna lie, I watched it in 2019 and I remember it being dark, but I remember this series being a lot more terrifying than the Bundy series.
Well, it's interesting because we have two different modern serial killers, two different shows, both on Netflix. And one engenders controversy and one doesn't. The other thing, and the reason why I thought about it, was you talk about how good looking Jeffrey Dahmer was. Yeah, so was Ted Bundy.
And they're both played by two very good looking actors.
Right. The other thing it reminded me of was when I was in professional wrestling for the brief time that I was for XPW, we actually had a character who was Pogo the Clown, and it was based on John Wayne Gacy. Which, you take that and the Halloween costume thing, the proliferation of true crime podcasts, mostly listened to by white women, the boom in true crime television shows like Snapped or whatever. There's a lot of worried husbands at home watching their wives watch a lot of these shows, and you can't talk about this without acknowledging the fascination with serial killers. Anyone that I don't have that fascination. I work in correctional mental health. I don't care as such. This is not something I run after. But I do talk to a lot of like my nursing friends, female nursing friends, who love this stuff. And I'm like, why? Why are you so obsessed with serial killers? I just want to know, what, the average human being, there's 300 billion people on this planet. Not everyone's a serial killer. So the ones that do really stand out. And when they do, people want to know why. What drives a guy like Jeffrey Dahmer to want to drug, dismember, and eat people? What drives Ted Bundy to do what he did? What drives John Wayne Gacy to do what he did? Charles Manson, etc. In more and more modern times, you have the father and the son that shot up the people in DC. You've got the Columbine kids, those school shooters, that sort of thing. You have the most recent one where everyone's fighting with each other about whether or not it actually happened. The one kid who shot up his school, I think it was in Connecticut. Which
one?
Yeah, well,
I'm
but
not
again,
saying that as a joke. I'm being totally serious.
Right.
Here. We just had another school shooting yesterday in St. Louis.
Right, and the fact that we're not even they're not even big news anymore. There was a point where the whole country would stop if there was a school shooting. Now it's like, oh, there's another one. Okay, you don't even know unless you live there. So my point being, there is, I think, on the one hand, a fascination with why people do what they do, but also sort of the tacit recognition that if we don't figure this out, a lot more people are going to get hurt. And so I think that's the benefit of stories like these, is to remind us, hey, we have a problem where we have neglected people with mental illness that some of them will turn into, not all of them, obviously, but some of them, a very select few, will then turn into monsters. And then what do we do? Because one of the things the series talks about is the traumatic effect that monster had on that community, on those families that they were living with years and years after. You know, Niecy Nash talks about in the show in the last episode or two how they can't sleep in their own beds out of like trauma and fear and night terrors and whatnot. And so they sleep in the hallway, things like that.
And then of course they find out that they're being evicted. The building is the owner of the building has just decided to have the building condemned. It's just there is no saving it. And he's not wrong. And again, a lot of this does come back to it's like, is it better to memorialize or to just try to I don't want to say the words cover. I'm sorry. It's been raining like crazy and I've got so much crap in my throat. I don't want to use the phrase cover up or erase, but so much of this, we see them saying it's like, if we don't just get rid of it, it will be glamorized. In the final episode, we find out that Dahmer's mother tried to save his brain to have it studied. And his father was like, no, he specifically said in his will, he wanted to be cremated. And the judge actually sides with the father saying, enough with this. Enough with trying. It's like, we need to move on, destroy the brain.
See, I disagree with that. I think the more we understand, the more we learn, the better off we'll be. You know, you wanted to finish your statement. So I wanted to cut in and say the last review we did of The Wire, at the end of it, when for those that didn't see the review or hear the review or just don't know anything about The Wire, in the third season, one of the majors decides that there's going to be a section of Baltimore that they're just going to allow drugs to be dealt. They're just not, they'll police it, but they're not going to stop the drug dealing from happening. And as long as you're dealing drugs there, you won't get arrested. They get the name Amsterdam because drugs are legal in Amsterdam, but because it's ghetto kids, they called it Ham with an H, Hamsterdam. By the end of season 3, Hamsterdam has been bulldozed. And Bubbles is talking to Major Colvin, who did this, and he was like, it's like they took a big eraser and just ran it over it. Like, whoop, get this out of here. While I can certainly sympathize with the idea of we need to process, we need to heal, and we need to move on, turn the pages of your life and go on to the next chapter, I think some room needs to be left for leaving things around for other people to study. You don't have to. You don't have to continue to go over the same upsetting events. But I do think there are people out there, like the NFL thing where there was a lot of like suicides and whatnot. And a couple of the players like shot themselves in the heart because they wanted their brains preserved.
To be studied, exactly.
Yeah, that sort of thing. I'm like, I think there's room in this world for both. I get asked a lot, like, do you think science and religion can ever be reconciled? And I was like, sure. I think there's room in this world for faith and science. It's the ones that want to make you choose that are the problem. So as far as the series goes, I sympathize with the perspective of the show, about people, about how traumatizing this was. What's more interesting to me about this show, and we haven't really talked about it yet, is the benign neglect of the police. That this one, he got away with it for so long because the cops that were dealing with it, who got left off the hook, by the way, they were investigated. So there's a lot about the kid from Laos, the 14-year-old kid from Laos who he ends up murdering. And the scene,
whose older brother was also sexually assaulted by Dahmer, and Dahmer got sent to prison, but he got out pretty quick.
Right, because this country hates children and doesn't sentence people long enough when they attack them. By the way, off my soapbox. But what did this country hate more than gays and blacks? All children, all of them, just every last one, doesn't matter what color. Anyway, so the scene is he's drugged this kid, this 14-year-old kid that he was supposed to like buy alcohol for, and of course, it doesn't go that way. The kid runs naked out of the apartment and collapses in front.
He wasn't just drugged; he was partially lobotomized. Okay. He poured boiling water or acid or something. He drugged him. Oh my God, I feel sick just talking about this. Drilled a hole in his head and poured either acid or boiling water into it to try to. Dahmer admitted that what he wanted to do was essentially make
zombies.
Yeah. He wanted someone who would just stay with him and not leave and not have to do anything. We get an early episode where he steals a mannequin from a clothing store, and the way he caresses it in bed is disturbing, but you realize so much of that's what he wanted.
I was joking with
that mannequin.
I watched that scene yesterday, and I was texting with a friend of mine, and I was like, we were talking about the show. Like, can you imagine getting your pages for that day? You're Evan Peters, you've got this Netflix show. This could be a game changer for you. You could get a lot of really great, juicy, dramatic roles after this. You got to hit a home run. You got to nail this. And he gets his pages for that episode. He's like, I got to do what with this mannequin? What? Why? We can't just allude to it. No, Evan, I need you to get right on top of that mannequin. I'm going to need you to fuck that mannequin, Evan. I am Ryan Murphy. Make love to it. Like, oh my God.
It was a very detailed mannequin to move.
I need you to treat that mannequin like the whore that it is. Okay, Ryan. Jesus Christ.
Oh my God.
Make another American Crime Story, for God's sake. No. An American love story starring Evan Peters and a mannequin. Jesus, Ryan, calm down.
Oh.
That's how I imagine that whole day went.
Have
Ryan Murphy doesn't even have the camera on. He's like, how many takes are we doing? Oh, that's right. Turn the camera on.
Oh, shit.
Damn you, Ryan. Are you good? Can we move on?
Yes. Going back to the boy who was, it's like, let's stop laughing about the mannequin and go back to the boy who was partially lobotomized.
So yeah, so the cops come and investigate, and Niecy Nash is like, does he not seem like a child to you? They're like, how old is he? 19? Yeah, he looks 19. Does he have ID? He lost his ID. It's fine. He's like, he's my boyfriend.
He's sitting in there in his underwear.
Right.
He
he's
doesn't
your
have
boyfriend?
any clothes on.
Yeah. Oh, he's your boyfriend? That's fine. Just take him upstairs. And Niecy Nash is like, are you fucking serious? None of this looks at all suspicious to you. You really have to dig into that scene a little bit. You're the cops. You don't care if homosexuals get killed or not. You just kind of not want to deal with them. You certainly don't care what happens to black people in that community. And you don't really want to get your hands dirty. I mean, this is something that happens now, but for entirely different reasons, where you have cops that are sometimes afraid to deal with a situation because no good can come of it. They deal with the situation if it goes in any way badly, and even if it doesn't, they might get accused of it anyway. There's like, no, if I get involved in something, if I go to make an arrest, I get in trouble because I might have, violated this or that or upset somebody or whatever. There's just a lot, because of like the whole like defund the police movement and all that. There's a lot of cops that are just like, I don't even know why I get out of my squad car anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I'm not appreciated for anything that I do. It's like, for every 100 officers that maintain the rules and do the appropriate thing, one does something bad. But everyone gets tarred with the same feather is the perspective of a lot of law enforcement.
Absolutely.
We suffer for the bad apples amongst us, and we're not given any benefit of the doubt anymore. It's kind of hard to get the willpower to get up and do my job. Like, I'll respond to something if I have to, but if I don't, I'm not entirely sure why I bother. And you look at those cops in that scene, and they're just like, whatever grossness this is, we don't want to deal with it. Just take it back into the apartment. And Niecy Nash is like, a crime is being perpetuated here. Maybe, but if I do anything about it, it could be trouble. Just leave it alone.
Well, look at the first episode when you have the one victim who manages to escape. He's running down the street. He's got the handcuff on one hand. He is telling the cops, this guy tried to drug me. He said he was going to kill me. He said he was going to eat my heart. It isn't until the cops actually go in and find the hardcore evidence that they're actually even willing to do anything about it. They go in treating this like, okay, let's get this over and done with. They have an air of, oh, whatever. This is probably just some kind of role-playing thing gone wrong or something.
Right.
And it is important to point out that, again, Dahmer was stopped in 1991. Even in the early 90s, the homosexual community was still treated with a lot of disdain, and it's clear that these cops do not want to get involved. They do not understand homosexuality, and they do not understand what is going on between these two men, and they're kind of creeped out by it. It isn't until the one cop finds the pictures that Dahmer took of his victims and realizes these are real. These
Yeah, I
are
can't-
not, this is not just play shit. This is real, that they
Right.
suddenly snap back and realize, oh God, we got to do something.
Right. We can't walk. This is too big now. We can't walk away from this.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the whole thing. They're investigating, and let's give the investigations the benefit of the doubt here, because I don't know. I wasn't there. You know, I haven't read enough about this to make a determination of, oh, a lot of this was just papered over. Giving it the benefit of the doubt, when the officers are like, he's a grown man. The other guy's a grown man. Yeah, we could have done more, but what if we're wrong? It's so on the line, you know. It could go either way. There's a small part, just being fair-minded and giving the benefit of the doubt. There's a small part that kind of sides with the cops that goes, yeah, I can see why they ignored this. Now, when you weigh that up against the entire context of everything Dahmer did and everything that was said about him and the amount of complaints that went on, no, obviously this then goes through benign neglect. And more should have been done to punish the officers, but that's something the series talks about. The officers never get punished. I think,
and again, I was saying again, it's important to point out Dahmer himself said he didn't choose blacks, minorities, the like, because he was purposely targeting them.
Right.
But it's a case.
It's an interesting dichotomy because yes, Dahmer killed black and gay guys, but that's not the crime that's being permitted. That's not the crime being necessarily talked about in this show. The crime being talked about in the show is that the cops
ignoring it. Yes.
Right.
Essentially, the idea is that if Dahmer had been in a different neighborhood and been killing white people, the cops probably would have noticed it a little bit more quickly.
Had Dahmer been killing rich white women, he'd have gotten one or two, and that would have been the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
But and I don't mean and I don't say that facetiously or to be funny or whatever. You attack white women in this country, they will bring the National Guard on you. You attack gay black men, you might be able to get away with it for about 20 years before anyone figures it out.
Unfortunately.
That's our country.
Yep. Not proud of it.
It is what it is. But, you know, stories like this, hopefully, you know, stories like this should inspire people to then go to their local precincts and go, hey, I think I know we made fun of this. I know Robert Winfrey was throwing pumpkins on fire about this line from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but Falcon yelling at senators going, do better. Well, what was he supposed to do? Start be Black Adam, start throwing senators into the sky? All you really can say to your elected officials is do better. Do better, or we'll vote somebody else in your place who will hopefully not do worse. That's kind of democracy for you.
It's what we need to do as a society. We have to try. We have to do better.
So I hope that this series inspires people to hey, you know, in underserved communities, this is a reminder that, you know, the cops in this area, the cops need to do better, but the people themselves also need to not treat the cops as a hostile invading force. Would also be nice.
Very true. But again, this series does, I mean, even to the fact that we have someone calling family victims not threatening them per se, but just coming across as truly terrifying. And you find out it's those two cops who got let off.
Right. You know, because that Laotian family dared to challenge cops that weren't doing the right thing and allowed their son to be murdered. And they're, you know, and they're the offended ones. Yeah.
It's this is the guy who sexually assaulted our first son and then killed our second son. It's and if you had done your job the first time, maybe more victims could have been spared. Right.
And instead of having the cognitive ability to be like, oh, well, you know, you're right. I'll, you know, at the very least, sorry, we fucked up. We'll do better. It's how dare you? How dare you challenge me, law enforcement, and shame us and say that we did a bad job? We're law enforcement. We're perfect. See, this is where that antagonism comes from. You have, this group of people who think they can't do any wrong and a group of people constantly being wronged. They're going to fight a lot. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say anything. I was still listening. I was just, again, sorry, clearing out my throat. There are a couple of points in the series I do want to talk about there. You know, we agreed we weren't going to discuss episode by episode because then we're going to be here forever. But there are a couple of really good episodes I want to talk about. One is Silence. This is the episode about Tony Hughes, who was one of the victims and was deaf. Again, the show does not just focus on Dahmer, but we jump around to perspectives from a variety of characters. And we do see the perspective from a couple of his victims, Hughes being one of of the most prolific ones, as we see that he and Dahmer actually do have a connection. In fact, it's almost kind of sad because he lets him go, but then when Hughes comes back because he forgot his keys, and you realize that if he hadn't done that, he might have escaped. And it's just kind of, it's really scary to think about something like that. But the episode does a great job. It's very similar to an episode of Only Murders in the Building that we discussed that took entirely from Theo's perspective, so there was very little dialogue. We see Tony and how he interacts with people being deaf and how he and his family sign to one another. Again, it's a very fascinating episode, and Tony's family was very unhappy with the portrayal of it, but I would need to do more research and listen to their arguments. But just from a storytelling perspective, a dramatic set point, I thought this was a very well done episode.
I did too. Unfortunately, I was also watching it while I was doing stuff on my computer, so I didn't realize the whole thing was going to be silent. But to your point about taking one episode and doing something a little bit different with it, that's separate from the rest of the series, doing it all with no sound and having to read the captions as they sign to each other or read lips or whatever. It was an interesting episode. I think it broke up the show nicely, as does the episodes that deal just with Niecy Nash or the guy who plays Lionel Dahmer.
Richard Jenkins, who is one of the best character actors out there. I've seen him in so much, and he is amazing.
I didn't realize the ex-wife, the stepwife, Jesus Christ, the second wife, Jeffrey Dahmer's stepmother. I didn't realize
Molly
that was Molly Ringwald. Yeah. What? Look, credit to the costume and hair people on this show. That did not look like Molly Ringwald at all.
I think it is also important the way that they do see a lot from Lionel and his first wife's perspective, especially we get a later episode where they try to find the blame for this. And this is something that we do as not as society, but just as humans. We want to find something to blame. We are terrified of when things go wrong and there is no reason for it. That is the scariest thing to us, is the idea that there is no point of why something has gone wrong. And you see Lionel's wife blaming each other. You see all this, and yes, according to this, his first wife, Jeffrey's mother, was on a crazy amount of drugs, psychiatric drugs, while she was pregnant. And obviously we know now, probably not a good thing, but it's just kind of terrifying the way that they fight about it, because they really want to know, why did our son end up like this? Whose fault was it? Was it because my wife was on drugs? Was it because I left the house all the time? Who do we point that we want to put? We as humans need to find something to point our fingers at.
They say that religion is the usefulness of religion is to explain the things that science can't. Humans want to know but why, and where science fails them, there is faith. The idea that that you could have brought this person into this world and this person would go on to hurt so many people, and you just want to know why. You have to wrap your head around it. I often say to my wife, if I could just understand your decision, I could accept it. I can accept that it's the wrong one, but at least I know how you got there. I gotta understand why you're doing what you're doing. Same thing with my kids. It's just like, explain to me how we got to this point, because I could deal with it a lot better. Dennis Leary's whole thing about the kid who stuck the peanut butter sandwich in the VCR, or the laser disc player, whatever it was, things like that. Like, explain to me how we got from yada yada. And Jeffrey Dahmer, and Lionel's sitting there like, I don't understand why you were sexually assaulting and eating people. And if I could live with this a little bit better. And the last couple of episodes are about living with this thing. Jeffrey Dahmer created this event that affected so many people, from his family to the victims' families to local law enforcement, city officials. Like, this touched everybody in that community, far and wide. And then everyone's just like, but how did this happen? Why did this happen? The show talks about mental illness. It talks about neglect. It talks about it talks about the ways in which parents try to bond with their children and you think you're doing the right thing. You think you're making the right decisions. I talked about this last week about, Steve Martin saying to his daughter, like, I didn't think I was allowed to talk to you. Lionel has kind of this moment of like, I didn't know I was supposed to check on him over the summer. I should have, I suppose. I didn't know his mother was going to leave him. And just the enormous amount of guilt that's being processed through this whole thing. And then you have Jeffrey Dahmer himself, and they're like, but why? And he was like, I was compelled to. I don't know why. I think, like, why was it such a long time between victims? I was trying to be good. I know this wasn't good. He had that much of a conscience about it, but it is an interesting thing to consider, the human brain, in that we are pushed to do the things that we are, even when we're hurting ourselves and the people around us, and we do it anyway. Why does that happen? And I think the why is important, and I think investigating the why is something that should happen. But as we talked about almost an hour ago, it's almost like I don't want to know why. I just want it to stop. I'm not entirely sure what the benefit of that is.
And we also look at the idea of who does benefit in the end, and what is that benefit deserved? Lionel ends up writing a book about his experience with his son, and we see the beginning. He's not doing this for cash. He's not doing this as a publicity thing.
Mm-hmm.
He starts writing the book as a way to deal with his demons. Not unheard of.
They just did this in Halloween Ends. It opens with fucking Jamie Lee Curtis writing about her experiences with Michael Myers.
Exactly. A lot of people write and do this because, I mean, there's a reason that there are so many therapists who say, write the stuff down, or art therapy, page your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
This is a way for him to kind of get down, to really figure out what happened and to get it out. But the victims file a lawsuit against him to stop it from being published and to stop him from making any money, because they're saying any money you make from this should go to the victims. And he's sitting there going, I wasn't doing this to glamorize what my son did. Right.
Again, it goes back to the overuse of that word. Like, I really, like, a little ways back, Robert and I had a discussion over, could we actually define what toxic masculinity is? Because it seemed to just be any behavior women don't like about men. Like, there's no good definition here. There's no one can really agree what this is. Can we, like, talk about what glamorizing is? Because to me, being to glamorize, to be exploitive, is to do something merely to make money off of it, or to, when they say sensationalize, like, you're making this out to be like it was a good thing. Did anyone watch this thinking what Jeffrey Dahmer did was a good thing? Like, if you as a person watched this entire series and thought, that man's inspired me.
Then you need to go get on those same mood stabilizers they put him on.
Yeah, like the problem isn't the show or general sensationalism. The problem is your mental illness. Like, nobody with a sound mind watched this show and thought, oh, this was a good thing he was doing. What a way to... This is exactly what the gay and black community needed. Nobody thought that. And if you did, you're a lunatic.
Pretty much.
I don't see how this is glamorizing any of it. At no point is the perspective of this show Jeffrey Dahmer's the victim in all of this.
Like I said, there is a bit of a double-edged sword on this, though, because there is the fact that Evan Peters, again, who knocks it out of the park, there was some people who felt that they made him too sexy. I mean, again, Jeffrey Dahmer was a good-looking man. Evan Peters is freaking gorgeous.
Well, I understand, because he shows up in every scene shirtless with abs, and his skin's
he has some great abs.
And his skin's all oily. Why does every scene he's in, as he's molesting, people, he's going oot, 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 oot? I get it. I understand the over-sexualization of Evan Peters in this. I understand how sexy he was.
Is.
Yeah, and every, all the victims called him sir, as he was, pulling out his cat o' nine tails or his flogger. Now I'm doing 50 Shades jokes. Before he attacked all of his victims, he was just wearing a pair of jeans, right?
Pretty much.
Anyway,
if you'd
like
like
to hear
cleared off what few listeners we had left.
If you'd like to hear more of my sexy takes on the 50 Shades trilogy, hear me and my wife talk about it in the archives.
Sweet Jesus.
Yep, Melissa Radulich. She's been on Baby Metal. She reviewed a Sister Hazel album with me, the 50 Shades movies, and Downton Abbey.
So, anyways, I think we've talked about all the major points of this.
Mhm.
I do love the last episode, the fact that they even point out the parallel of the Dahmer got baptized in the prison at the
Mhm.
exact same time as John Wayne Gacy's execution, which happened during a freaking solar eclipse. This is 100% true. That really did happen.
I got nothing. Sorry. Actually, I thought it was a bit jarring that they went to John Wayne Gacy and all of that, because I'm watching that episode and I'm like, wait, why are we doing John Wayne Gacy now? Like, what does this have to do with anything?
It took me a minute to I'm just gonna say it. It wasn't until he got the clown makeup on I realized who that was.
Right.
I think it was the parallel to show the interview that he gave, saying that as he had been baptized in church, so he said he was good with God, and that was Dahmer's incentive to realize maybe I should do the same thing.
Gotcha.
Because Dahmer was very devoted to Christ while he was in prison. He was an adamant churchgoer there. He was very close with the prison's priest, minister, reverend. I don't know what the title is exactly. And he was baptized as a born-again Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the main point of doing that. But again, the fact that, yeah, he was baptized at the same time that Gacy was executed is not a crucial point, but a very interesting one. That's one of those little trivia nuggets that is just like too fascinating to ignore, if you ask me.
The last thing I want to talk about is, I'm just curious, and we don't have to spend too long on it, but I'm wondering if they could have gotten away with 8 episodes as opposed to 10. Because his trial is like episodes like 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like 8 and 9 is the aftermath. But even in the aftermath, I'm like, okay, I only needed 1 episode of this. 1 episode of everyone kind of moving on, you know, and the lawsuits that followed and all of that and what happened with the cops. We're on episode 10 here. And I'm like, well, what more fucking story is there left to tell of this? Like, I really think they could have gotten this whole story in 8 episodes. I think 8 hours of television was plenty. I don't know if 10, I think 10's a little overkill.
8 and 9 seem also to be, well, they are the ones that focus more on Dahmer's family and the victims in the aftermath. These are the episodes where you find out about Tony Hughes' mother suing Lionel Dahmer over the profits of the book. The 2 officers who were suspended over for the record, we're saying the last boy because his name is something that neither of us can pronounce, so our apologies. And a little bit about Dahmer's fan base. He did get fan mail with people sending him money saying, hey, can you send me back autographed
that
items?
line about like, hey, like he's trying to make a trade with a guy that looks like Charles Manson, and he's like, I got all these girls sending me naked pics, their pussies are hanging out and everything. He's like, I got no use for them. Like that, I don't know why that line cracked me up.
But it is also absolutely disturbing to think about how the fan base. You have that one gentleman who bought all of Dahmer's items that were put up at auction.
What a great stage of dialogue that is the guy's playing with the drill and the lawyer's like, hey, you piece of shit, put that down, that's my property. And the guy's like, what? He's like gonna hit him, and he's just like, I know you're union rep, I'll get you fired, get out of here, you sack of shit. Like, oh, are you in my family? I feel like I know you.
But yes, he gets all of Dahmer's memorabilia, but he has it destroyed.
Right.
He says flat out, because he's not wrong. The idea of these things becoming collector's items. We have seen things like that where people are just like, yeah, this actually belonged to this serial killer. We see things that belong to the Nazis that are collector's items. Yeah. You know, a plate from that was used by the Third Reich can go for hundreds of thousands of dollars on the right market. He's not wrong. And again, he says flat out, we do not want that. He has it destroyed.
Yep.
So, wow, it's like, I was just talking about those last 2 episodes that you said to cut, but I think that was the reason that they were left in there. Again, I think it was important for the show to talk about not just Dahmer, but the reaction of everyone else around him.
I think then maybe some of because the first 2 or 3 episodes, like I said, they're so hyper focused on the one victim. Like that first episode is only about that one guy that runs to the police and gets the whole thing started. We probably could have cut some of that and, you know, maybe truncated a little bit of the story to get it down to 8 episodes instead of 10. But, I don't know. I think Robert and I have said this now a couple of times. It feels like when they start to put these shows and movies together, because they're going to go straight to streaming, nobody cares about length anymore. Like there a lot of babies that would have been killed in the editing process get to stay alive because it's like, why we have as much time as we need. Okay.
Well, I think the one thing that we can definitely take away from this is that despite the outcry from the victims' families and the loved ones, we are going to definitely get more of this. This show was Netflix. The numbers for, it's like, hang on a second. Where's the... the series rose to the #1 spot on Netflix in the first week of the release. Netflix announced Dahmer was its 9th most popular English language TV show of all time, with 56 million households having viewed all 10 episodes. This will happen again. Murphy will do another series about another killer. I have absolutely no idea who he's going to pick.
Okay, but let's talk about Ryan Murphy for just a second, because we talked about American Horror Story. He's an American Crime Story. You got to understand what these things are, though. So, like, just looking through his TV, right? He is the creator of Nip Tuck, Glee, American Horror Story. So, American Crime Story. Want to know what those were? The first one was The People versus O.J. Simpson. That was in 2016. It's amazing, by the way. I love that series. But does that glamorize? Are we going to get on Ryan Murphy's case for glamorizing fucking OJ in that one? Because that made a lot of people look bad. Like nobody got out of that show looking good at all. No, none of the attorneys, not OJ himself. Nobody gets out of that one looking good.
No one got out of that trial looking good. That thing was a joke.
The assassination of Gianni Versace. It's not as good as the OJ one, but again, like I wouldn't say that anyone was glamorized or sensationalized, and that is just kind of like a dramatization of what happened. And then this last one, this one I'm intimately familiar with, Impeachment. There's the story about like Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp and the whole, and the Clinton thing. Like again, we've not talked about any of these on this network, but if I had the opportunity to talk about impeachment, I was like, that doesn't make Monica look good at all. It makes Linda Tripp look like a fucking monster. It obviously makes the president look terrible. Hillary Clinton, like you can't get out of that show without thinking that she totally stayed with him for the power and not in any way for any kind of romantic feelings. Like, boy, was that a marriage of convenience. Like again, he tells these stories about these people and how ugly they are. That's kind of the Ryan Murphy thing. Like, this isn't sexy in any way. This is like, here's this thing that we're trying to forget about, and I don't think we should. And I think that's sort of the beauty of what Ryan Murphy does.
He is really talented with adaptations. His film adaptations, or his films also include the adaptation of Augustin Burroughs' memoir, Running with Scissors, the memoir, Eat, Pray, Love, the film adaptation of Larry Kramer's play, The Normal Heart. This is a talent that he has. He is really good at adapting to screen. This is... it sounds kind of stupid saying like this, but this is not something that everyone can do really well. This is a talent he has. The man has received 6 Primetime Emmy Awards with 36 nominations. He will come back. He will do another killer. It is clear from the numbers of this series that Netflix is going to want to see this again. So,
I mean, the thing, he's one of the more successful showrunners and creators in Hollywood right now. He'll get more gigs just because people watch his shit. So...
yeah, I couldn't begin to tell you who he's going to do next. I mean, part of me actually wonders if you would do a John Wayne Gacy series.
Who knows? I don't know. There's a lot of stories out there. I'll tell you that much.
There are. You said it yourself. Our history it's not pretty.
Rife. Rife with stories that need to be told. Many of them ugly.
Many ugly stories. So, yeah, when that comes back, we'll probably discuss it again, and we'll be like, oh, here we are again. Let's talk about the controversy again. All right, so that wraps that up about our discussion of Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. So, unless there's anything else that we forgot to talk about, you're shaking your head, so I'm guessing that means no. So let's go ahead and move on to plugs. All right. So kind.
So because I'm going to Stevie Nicks tonight, our usual Damn You Hollywood that we would have done on Tuesdays, we did last night. We reviewed the new Black Adam movie that's in the archives now. Go ahead and check that out. Tomorrow, the Superblog team up goes straight to hell. Right to hell, Alexis Hejna. And our contribution to Superblog Team Up Goes to Hell is a commentary track that Pat Mullen and I did for Hell Comes to Frogtown, or Frogtown Goes to Hell, one of the two, starring Roddy Piper. It's a fun one. We had a good time doing it. We recorded it a few weeks ago. The audio will be up tomorrow. The video's been up for a while. That'll be promoted with all the other Superblog Team Up stuff on Twitter and Facebook. In addition to which, you'll be reviewing Midnight Club.
Yes, this was supposed to happen last week. If you actually tuned in and were wondering where the hell it was, I'm sorry. One of our reviewers dropped out due to losing his voice. I actually need to check back with him, see if he's feeling any better. And I was a little cramped on time, so we just sort of sat around and agreed, let's push this back a week so we're all on better footing for this. So I apologize if you did sit back and wonder, where the hell is that review of Midnight Club that was promised? We will be reviewing it tomorrow night.
So that's also the Superblog Team Up submission for source material is Batman Punisher Lake of Fire. That'll be in audio format tomorrow. Friday, I'll be back doing another TV party. My old boss, Wags, she years ago, when I was really into reading Michael Pollan books, there was a documentary series based on one of his books called Cooked, and I brought her on for that. She contacted me last week and she was like, hey, have you seen Michael Pollan's got a new Netflix 4-part documentary series about psychedelics and mental health? And I was like, no, but that sounds interesting. She's like, we should talk about it. I'm like, we totally should. So we're going to do that unless he bails on me. We're going to do that Friday at noon, right before I go to Halloween Horror Nights. So there's that. Saturday, we've got the very last of the Everyone Loves the Bad Guys Treehouse of Horror. That was the finale of the Everyone Loves the Bad Guy series. That'll be the 29th. We'll have a re-airing of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. There'll be an unspoken issue for Resident Evil comics. And then on Halloween itself, an Everyone Loves the Bad Guy Halloween special that was done years and years ago with Robert Winfrey and Sean Comer. And then we'll be back a week from tonight in our usual Tuesday spot for Damn You Hollywood. We'll be reviewing Pray for the Devil. I saw Clerks 3 this past weekend. Cried a lot. It was a real tearjerker at times. And because of that, Ronnie contacted me, Ronnie Adams of the Screaming Boy podcast, and he said, hey, can we discuss all the Clerks movies since Clerks 3 just came out? And I said, yes, we can. So much like we did with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that came out earlier this year, we're going to do all three at the same time. The new one, the old one, and the one nobody likes. The Clerk Long Road to Ruin Clerks. That'll be Wednesday. Thursday night, it's the anniversary of the movie They Live, yes, yet again, starring Roddy Piper. I'm going to have Pat Mullen to do an on trial for that. And then that's it. So that takes us all the way through November 3rd. That's all my stuff. You can, all my socials are in the link to this podcast. You can check me out on the Rattles and Broadcasting Facebook, Twitter. Clips of these shows are posted on TikTok, along with the other chicanery I get into, pictures of my family, whatever. And then finally, ladies, I'm on Snapchat wearing this shirt. Or not, depending on how you like it. Speaking of how you like it, Alexis Hejna.
All right. Well, yeah, it looks like I am off next week, but I will be back on November 7th. I will be leading a discussion about House of the Dragon. Season just wrapped up, so we're looking forward to talking about that and whether or not the first season actually does redeem the disaster that was the final season of Game of Thrones. Other than selling my soul for Mark Radulich, Honeysuckle Rose Creations, where fashion meets fandom at the intersection of geek and chic. We just wrapped up our last convention of 2022. That was at Anime NebraskaCon in Omaha. Wonderful show. We had so much fun. Thanks to everyone who came out to that. I really hope to be there next year. In the meantime, we got to get ready. Holidays are upon us, folks. We will be doing our big Black Friday sale. Everything in both of our Etsy and Handmade at Amazon shops will be 20% off. And we will be doing our charity drive for those who purchase anything from either shop from Black Friday to Christmas Eve. For every orders that is placed, we will donate $5 to the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We're going to be adding some more stuff online here within the next few weeks. I want to make sure that both stores are fully stocked and ready to go. I want to make sure that you got access to anything you could possibly want for the holidays. Again, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And again, our shops are open on Etsy and Handmade at Amazon. That is Honeysuckle Rose Creations, the intersection of geek and chic. And with that, on behalf of Mark Radulich, be well, be safe, behave.